Good afternoon once again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with Matt Balzer, and we are here today to continue our top 10 list. So the last 3 days, if you haven't seen the episodes yet, make sure to check us out on Facebook. Remember to like and share your comments below. Share with us your top 10, and also you can check us out on YouTube. And remember to subscribe and like there as well. So today, our last 3 episodes were on centers, left wingers, and right wingers, and today we get to the defensemen. This is going to be exciting. This was tough again, like the other 3 categories, but I think it seemed a little easier because there was so many good defensemen that stood out. But after the first few, it gets tough to see who even makes our top 10, who makes our honorable mentions, and who gets left off the list. So I believe you started yesterday, so I'm going to jump right into it and start today. So my number 10 defenseman, as we'll count down from 10 through 1, Phoenix Coyotes or Arizona Coyotes defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson, the Swedish great player that's played there for several seasons now. He is very underrated because of the team that he plays on. 42 points last year, a little bit lower than some of the other guys that are out there that put up points. But this guy logs an absolute ton of minutes and is, I think, one of the reasons why they are actually competitive in the desert. He has – I don't know if he makes your top 10 or not, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a few minutes. But for me, he's just so good both defensively and offensively. Not quite as flashy as a guy like Erik Karlsson, but gets the job done and is, like I said, he's just a steady pillar that can log a lot of minutes and play well at both ends of the ice for the Coyotes. My number 9, we go to Dallas with John Klingberg. Is that his name? Yeah, John?
Yeah, John Klingberg. Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank for a second there because I only have his last name written down. John Klingberg. 67 points last year, turning into a power play specialist. Not quite as strong in his own end, but definitely can put up the points. Absolutely complements players like Ben and Seguin and Radulov on that first-line power play. Really just stepping into his own in Dallas as he's only been in the league for a few years, but absolutely catapulted up the list to make my top 10. I didn't even think he would make my top 10. But with the amount of points he put up last year and the consistency that he's starting to show from year to year, he's in my top 10. So my number 8, we're going to go to Nashville, Smashville, Tennessee with PK Subban. Obviously, this guy, he's been doing it all over for both Montreal and now Nashville. 59 points last year. He does it at both ends of the ice. One of the better underrated defensive defensemen that are out there, as seen in the Stanley Cup finals a couple of years ago when he played against Sidney Crosby. Great hand-eye coordination. Guys were trying to chip and chase around him, and he was very good at knocking the puck down and keeping them from the forecheck. But that's my first 3. Very tough to come up with. And we're going to throw it over to you for your first 3.
All right, yeah. So John Klingberg just fell off my top 10 list, but yeah, I got no argument. He could be in the top 10 list anywhere. The guy's offensive ability is crazy, but that thing that did take him down a notch was his defensive play not being as strong. But I like to see with the new coach in Dallas this year where things will go there. But yeah, my number 10. I think this guy is the most underrated defenseman in the league. Nashville Predators defenseman Roman Josi. I think Mark Scheifele, I think he was asked to name like his top 5 guys in the NHL, and he put Roman Josi on that top 5 list. This guy consistently puts up between 50 to 60 points on the back end, and at a great deal. He's only making $4 million. I think Nashville signed him really early, I think after only like his 3rd year, to like a 7-year, $28 million contract, knowing the potential he could get. So he's one of the best deals in the NHL. But 14 goals, 53 points, in 75 games and had another 4 points in the playoffs. But yeah, he's a great mobile defenseman, and playing with Ryan Ellis on that top pair, yeah, he's just spectacular back there. My number 9 from the Washington Capitals, John Carlson. This guy led all NHL defensemen in points last year with 68. He had 15 goals, and in the playoffs, he had 5 goals and 20 points in 24 games. This guy runs the power play on the point there in Washington. Just an absolute career year, and got rewarded with an 8-year extension at $8 million, which I believe makes him maybe like the 3rd or 4th highest paid defenseman in the NHL. But yeah, just really consistent, and especially if you look at Washington's defense with guys like Orlov and Niskanen and Kempny, there's not really, outside of Orlov, there aren't really guys that have that huge, big offensive ability on that team. So they lean a whole lot on him.
Mm-hmm.
My number 8, also from the Arizona Coyotes, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. As you brought him up, yeah, not talked about as much. This guy is probably one of the best goal scorers from a defenseman. This guy can potentially put up to 15, 20 goals every year. The one thing is that he doesn't get a whole lot of assists just because he is scoring a whole lot, usually between 20 to 30 assists a year. But this guy has been the backbone for that Arizona team for so many years, going through all the struggles and everything. And then Arizona luckily was able to get him to a long-term contract this off season. And I like to see as the Coyotes keep getting better, I think he'll start to get more recognition about how good he is. And hopefully in a couple of years, Arizona will be in the playoffs because of that.
Well, and I think his point totals will go up to the top of the league with as far as defensemen go when they get some better players to play with. It seems like a lot of the offense and defense is riding on his shoulders. So I thought I'd throw that in there before you start your 7 through 5. And I'll throw out my 7 through 5.
All right. So my number 7 from the St. Louis Blues, Alex Pietrangelo. Another guy that I think could win a Norris Trophy maybe in a couple of years. He had 15 goals, 54 points in 78 games for the Blues last year. He's the captain of that team since David Baca has left. He's a big power play quarterback. And he had the big off season. I believe his wife birthed triplets this off season. So that's a big change there for him. But yeah, this guy's mobile. He can make that first pass out of his zone very, very well. And defensively, he's very tough to play against. And with him and Jay Bouwmeester as a pairing the past few years, they've been really good as a top pairing. My number 6, PK Subban. As you brought up, he had 16 goals, 59 points. I think this could be the year that he might finally get to 20 goals as a defenseman. That slap shot that he has is crazy good, being on that top power play unit. And it is also nice being paired with Matthias Ekholm. That allows him to jump into the play a lot because he knows he has that steady defenseman that will cover for him if he does get caught. But yeah, as he brought up, his defensive play has been underrated. Like people thought, well, in Montreal, like when he did make a mistake, it was highlighted like really huge or whatever because it might cost something. Even though there's defensemen making those mistakes all the time, but because it's PK Subban and his personality, which I think is one of the greatest in all the NHL. Just following him this offseason, just with all his posts and his workout regimen is crazy to see all that he goes through. But yeah, I think this guy, he could put 20 goals, 60 points again this year, and is another guy that's won a Norris Trophy as well. And my number 5 from the San Jose Sharks, Brent Burns. This guy is a beast on that back end for the Sharks. Between him and Marc-Edouard Vlasic, as I'll mention, a lot of these guys, even though they're really good, they have that really strong defensive partner that they're consistently playing with, which is really nice. But yeah, Burns, had 332 shots on goal last year, but only scored 12 goals, which was a bit of a down year because he usually been averaging around 20 goals a year on the back end, which is really good for a defenseman because usually if it's a rarity to see a defenseman get to 20 goals. But yeah, 67 points in 82 games, led the Sharks in points last year, had won the Norris Trophy the year previous. And even then, you can still put him up at forward every once in a while. He's one of those rare guys like a Dustin Byfuglien that have played both forward and defense and have succeeded in each position. But yeah, just that consistency and the willingness to shoot the puck on the back end. I don't know how many shot attempts he had last year on top of getting all those shots. Yeah. But the guy has a great slap shot, even though he's getting up there in age and probably the greasiest beard in the NHL.
No arguments there. One thing I wanted to point out is as we did this exercise, some of the players that will make our honorable mention or didn't make this list or made the list, how many of them came from the Nashville Predators? Yeah. I've seen like 5 or 6 on my list going, holy smokes, they've all played there or are currently playing there at some point or another. My number 7, you've already talked about him, from the Washington Capitals, John Carlson, 68 points last year and 15 goals. There's not a lot more I can say about him other than he absolutely quarterbacks the Washington power play. To have both Backstrom and Kuznetsov feeding him or Ovechkin one-timers all night long is quite funny. Plus, they have TJ Oshie in the slot if those two guys are covered. So pretty hard to defend against when you got two great passers setting you up all night. And the beautiful thing is, if he doesn't have a shot, you can always slide it over to Obi after the pass comes. So their power play is disgusting. He's a great player. I think he's still underrated in his own zone. He did a lot better in his own zone than a lot of people give him credit for. But he's my number 7. My number 6, you also mentioned, from the St. Louis Blues, Alex Pietrangelo. He basically was, I see he's 5th in ice time last year for defensemen. Over almost 26 minutes per game he averaged with 54 points, really adding to a pillar of strength on the St. Louis defense. Shattenkirk got the big money when his contract came up, but they elected to keep Pietrangelo and let Shattenkirk go because of what he brings to the team, both offensively and defensively. He's one of those guys that you just want on your back end because he can control the game. My number 5, you haven't mentioned yet, and I'm sure you will. Columbus Blue Jacket, Seth Jones. Mm-hmm. He was not a Calder nominee, but a Norris nominee this year with 57 points. One that Nashville let get away, but they needed a forward, so they traded for Ryan Johansson. Seth Jones brings a lot to a young Columbus team. He's only been in the league now for about 3 or 4 seasons, and he's really picking up and making a name for himself as one of the best defensemen in the game. And again, he's one of those guys that plays both ends of the ice. He plays hard. It's almost playoff-like hockey for him all year long, and he's the reason why Columbus has been successful in that crazy Metropolitan Division. Mm-hmm. So that's my top, my 5 to 10, and Matt's 5 to 10. We're going to get now into our top 4, and I'm going to repeat a guy Matt's already talked about. Chewbacca from the San Jose Sharks, Brett Burns. 67 points, like you mentioned. This guy does it all. He's also amongst the leaders in the league for shot blocks. And he's physical. He's big. He's one of those guys that's really hard to check. When the game's on the line, you want him on the ice. You want him to have the puck because his determination helps get San Jose into some pretty good scoring opportunities. And the way he plays, like you mentioned, he had a ton of shots last year.
Mm.
And just for him to throw those on net, I mean, I bet you a lot of his – I wonder how many of his assists were just from shooting it at the net and getting rebounds. So, you know, he might have an ugly beard. He might have a really weird animal collection at home. But he gets the job done, and he's my number 4. My number 3, the guy who's been in lots of trade speculation from the Ottawa Senators, Erik Karlsson. Only played 71 games last year and still had 62 points. He's 3rd in ice time last year with 26.44 minutes per game. If this guy wasn't on Ottawa last year, Ottawa would have finished in 1st because they were so far in last. They would have thought they were in 1st. You know, this guy does it all for them. He logs a lot of important ice time. He's unbelievable offensively. He's unbelievable defensively. And it's a shame that Ottawa is in a position right now where they will probably have to trade him in order to move forward with some pieces at the end of the season. So that's my number 4, and that's my number 3. Matt, what do you got?
All right, so we're pretty close. So my number 4 is Seth Jones from the Columbus Blue Jackets. But yeah, 16 goals, 57 points last year for Columbus, and had 5 points in 6 games in the playoffs. This guy was the backbone of that Columbus defense. Between him and Zach Werenski on that back end, both of those guys are franchise defensemen. But Jones especially, this is one of the few defensemen that you really want to build your franchise around. He's mobile. He's got that big shot. You can sort of look at the way that PK Subban plays. Maybe not as flashy as Subban, but they're one in the same sort of type of player. But yeah, John Tortorella raved about this guy the entire year, and especially in that second half of the season, he went total beast mode to help Columbus get into the playoffs. And my number 3, also the same as yours, Erik Karlsson. If it wasn't for some of his defensive play of late, I think that brings him down just a little bit down. I think our top 2 will probably be the same. But Karlsson, yeah, offensively, this guy is the best in all the NHL. There's nobody better on the back end offensively than Erik Karlsson. This is like one of the few defensemen that can lead your team in points every single year. And to think having 62 points in 71 games, and he wasn't even fully healthy for probably most of the season, coming off that ankle injury that he had in the playoffs the year previous, where in those playoffs he was one of the best players in the entire playoffs that year, especially that pass to Mike Hoffman for that breakaway goal. That is still one of the best passes that I've seen, and one of the best finishes after that by Hoffman on that breakaway pass. But yeah, we'll see where we've been waiting patiently for this trade to happen. But yeah, the speculation is that it'll be coming out west. But yeah, we'll be Vancouver. It's sort of weird being a Canucks fan and saying that Erik Karlsson could come to your team, but by the time that he gets here, and by the time the core gets old enough, he'll already be like in maybe his mid-30s and going on the downturn, which he'll still be a really good defenseman, but he'll be past his prime and where the Canucks would be. So, but yeah, those are my 4 and 3.
Well, as we get down to the final 2, why don't you give us your 2, because it's probably the same as mine, and we'll talk about the same player, and then we'll talk about number 1.
All right. So either one of these guys could be number 1 in anybody's eyes, but the guy I picked at number 2 is Drew Doughty. This guy is probably one of the most competitive players I've seen. Sometimes it can get a little over the top with how his emotions show, but the guy averages basically around like 30 minutes a night, which is crazy to think with all the travel, all the games. That he can play between like that 28 to 30 minutes a night on that top pair. But yeah, 10 goals, 60 points in 82 games. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. He's won the Norris Trophy. He's got the gold medals with Canada. This guy is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, and he got rewarded with that huge new contract with the Kings, which I believe it was $11 million a year with that huge new contract with the Kings. But yeah, he's probably one of the best two-way defensemen in the NHL. But yeah, the Kings lean on him so heavily on their back end, and he's finally got a consistent pairing partner with Jake Muzzin. I think those two are probably one of the best two pairings in the entire NHL. And my number one, he's my favorite NHL defenseman to watch right now, is Victor Hedman of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He won the Norris Trophy last year. He had 17 goals, 63 points in 77 games, and had another 11 points in 17 playoff games for the Lightning. What can I say? This guy's huge. He's like 6'6" or 6'7". He's like a very mobile Zdeno Chara, except with even higher offensive abilities than Chara has had in his career. But yeah, he's on that top power play unit. Him and Anton Stralman on that top pairing can shut down anybody. And then offensively, he's finally come over the past few years into those 60 to 70 point marks, and I think he could potentially get to 80 points. But yeah, those Swedish defensemen, when they get going, we got a lot of them on there, like Hedman, Karlsson, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. You had John Klingberg, and there's many others in the NHL. They're some of the best defensemen in the NHL.
Well, for me, like you said, it's the same as yours. My number two, Drew Doughty. What can you say? Absolutely hate this guy as a Canucks fan, but he is a heck of a hockey player. I love the fact that he's on Team Canada during international play, even though I can't stand him when he's an LA King. But maybe it's just my distaste for the LA Kings. More than likely, that's what it is. But his attitude, his competitiveness goes hand in hand with why I don't like the LA Kings. But that's a good thing because he's one of those guys that you want on your team. You said he was the number one player in the NHL last year for ice time at nearly 27 minutes a night. But I know he did play over 30 minutes several times, especially if games went into overtime. He never came off the ice. He was a plus 23 and absolutely dominates for the LA Kings. They get very little offense in LA, and he seems to always get his points no matter what. So my number one, same as you, Norris Trophy winner, the Giant, Victor Hedman. This guy just does it all. He had the best plus-minus out of all defensemen last year, plus 32. And what we're talking, he's almost 70 away from Bobby Orr, right? We're talking about Bobby Orr the other day, Matt and I, and we were amazed at how he was a plus 100 one year. But Victor Hedman, plus 32, 63 points, so good and all over the ice, both ends of the ice. Very rarely does he make a mistake, and when he does, you usually can notice it because he barely ever makes one. But that's my number one. Remember to share your top 10 list with us down below in the comments. Let us know who you like. Some of my notables that I had to leave off the list, I'm going to start right away with a Nashville Predator and two ex-Nashville Predators in Roman Josi, who made your top 10. Shea Weber is another one out of Montreal. Love the guy, but unfortunately last year he's been battling some injuries. The trade hasn't worked out very well for Montreal for PK Subban, but he got into 26 games last year, 16 points, almost averaged 25 and a half minutes a game when he was healthy and when he did play. Has, in my opinion, the hardest slap shot in the NHL still. I would not want to block it whatsoever. But when healthy, in my opinion, he might crack this top 10. But because of the last few years, he's struggled with some injury. He's just on the outside looking in. Another one on the outside looking in is ex-Nashville Predator, current Minnesota Wild, Ryan Suter, who was second most ice time for defensemen, nearing the 27-minute mark, 51 points last year. And if it wasn't for an injury towards the end of the season, he may have got in that playoff series with Winnipeg. Winnipeg, I think, still would have won, but Ryan Suter would have made a big difference in that playoff series because of what he brings to the back end of the Minnesota Wild. Finally, to round out my last two notables, from the Philadelphia Flyers, Shane Gostisbehere, 65 points last year. I had to put him in my notables. I debated about whether or not to. He's still fairly young, but with that amount of points and the way he's been playing consistently now for the last few years, I want to give him a big shout out. And I think he may, if he keeps putting up the points in Philadelphia, he may end up cracking the top 10 very soon. And then finally, Boston Bruins defenseman Torrey Krug with 59 points. Again, another young guy, up and coming. He rounds out my notables. Matt, what do you got for us?
All right, yeah. So my notables, I had just missing out from the Winnipeg Jets, Dustin Byfuglien. This guy is an absolute beast. He had 45 points in 69 games, and in the playoffs he had 16 points in 17 games. And basically being a point a game for a defenseman in the playoffs is really this guy is physical. This is one guy you do not want to run into on the ice because he will beat the crap out of you, or he'll lay you right on your back, no questions asked. And offensively, I know he only had 8 goals last year, but he'd been averaging somewhere between 15 to 20 goals a year years previous. He is up there in age, so that's why he drops out just out of that top 10. My number 12, as you brought up, John Klingberg. Offensively, this guy is so good on the ice. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, his defensive game I think still has to come up a little bit. And basically some of my other honorables are the same as yours. Shea Weber was my number 13, being injured last year, but as you brought up, 16 points in 26 games. But in those, he had 75 shots on goal. So if you go over the course of the season, he could have been up there with Brent Burns for probably like 300 shots on goal. But yeah, this guy, it's like, it does suck since Montreal's gotten him that he's gone through all those injuries, because going from Nashville, he'd rarely ever been injured for them. And then as soon as the trade happened, it's like Subban took off and Weber's gone downhill. But I think when he is in the lineup, he's one of the best. And it showed when he did get hurt that the Canadiens were unable to replace everything that he brings on the ice. They tried guys like Jeff Petrie and a lot of other younger players, but nobody could replace him on the ice.
42 points for Petrie last year, which is incredible.
I know, yeah. Ryan Suter as well was a notable. When he went down with the broken ankle at the end of the year, I think I brought it up when we did the Minnesota Wild preview, that this is the second time that this has happened when it's gone to like the last couple games of the regular season and he's had a season-ending injury, and you could tell when the Wild played the Jets in the playoffs. He's another guy they couldn't replace. They have some good young defensemen in Matt Dumba there and Jonas Brodin, but nobody could replace what Ryan Suter brings to the Wild on the ice. And my last guy from the Florida Panthers, Aaron Ekblad. I know offensively that this guy hasn't gotten there yet. He still had 16 goals and 38 points last year, but I think his two-way game is one of the best in the NHL. He won the Calder Trophy in his first year in the league. And for a defenseman winning the Calder Trophy, you rarely ever see that. And I think maybe in a couple of years, this guy could be like an Oliver Ekman-Larsson point-wise, getting 20 goals to 50 points every year. But yeah, it's like, as we mentioned, there's like so many guys that could have been in those honorable mentions. Like if you just go off pure offense, like Gostisbehere, Tyson Barrie, Keith Yandel, I think, is another underrated defenseman in the NHL for Florida. He had 56 points last year. And if you go off that contract that Florida gave him, the guy's never hurt. I think he's like on some crazy, like, I don't know how many seasons in a row where he hasn't missed a game. Yeah, he's super underrated. But there are many other guys that I could mention, but I'll limit it there.
Well, some of the ones that we didn't mention that never made the notables, unfortunately, Like you already mentioned Tyson Barrie, Keith Yandel. How about Toronto Maple Leaf, Morgan Riley, New Jersey Devils, Sammy Vatanen, New York Ranger, Kevin Shattenkirk, and Chicago Blackhawks, Duncan Keith, right? So he potentially would have been on the top 10 list a few short years ago. But there's only room for 10. It takes talent. It takes courage to make our top 10. And we enjoyed doing this again. So remember to like us on Facebook and share as well. Share with us your top 10 defensemen and list them below here in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Remember to like and subscribe to us. We love bringing this to you. Tomorrow we're going to bring our final edition of our top 10 list with the goaltenders. It's going to be another tough task for the two of us to put those lists together. So share all of your lists with us because we'd love to interact with our fans. We have a few hundred people that watch every day, and we love being able to see everybody's opinions and thoughts because we know we're not right. We know we're not perfect, but we love sharing this with you guys because we love the sport of hockey. So we will see you guys all tomorrow. And again, we'll be talking about our top 10 list in goaltending. Have a great night, everyone.